What's up, Planeswalkers? It's your boy AK-Dog, back in Standard with an Azorious Flyers list. Obviously, Azorious Flyers lost a lot of their key pieces, Empyrean Eagle and things like that. But I feel like there's still just enough there to kind of give it a go. It's not super competitive or anything like that. Obviously, it wasn't even that competitive before. It was a solid deck. Definitely taking a step back, but I still think there's some fun things we can do with it. So this is my particular take on it. So obviously we don't have Spectral Sailor or Healer's Hawk anymore, but we do have Faerie Guidemother, which is pretty reasonable. Obviously most of our creatures already do have flying, so the sorcery side isn't really that great. But if you top deck this, then you can give one of your creatures already on the board +2/+1 and gain it for additional damage, and then play it down as a 1/1 flyer. So that's pretty reasonable use of this card. Kitesail Cleric is a 1/1 flyer for 1 mana. It also has this kicker for 4 mana, so 2 and 2 white. And when it enters, it was kick, tap up to 2 target creatures. So if your opponent is running flyers or like Elder Gargaroth, something with reach, then you have a way to kind of tap their creatures down and at least get through. Obviously, they do get to untap with it on their turn, but if you could potentially kill your opponent or pressure them enough to where they don't really have good attacks, then that could certainly be relevant in at least some situations. And either way, it's a 1 mana 1/1 flyer. And since we want to have as many cheap flyers to kind of go wide and kind of swarm our opponent, it's a pretty reasonable creature. For Merfolk Windrobber, obviously typically see this in the rogue builds, but still pretty reasonable fit for us as well. We're not really caring about milling our opponent, but obviously in the late game, once your opponent has we've gotten couple mill procs off of this, and your opponents cast their spells and fill up their own graveyard with things, then obviously in late game, and we can sacrifice this to draw a card to kind of dig for a way to kind of finish out the game. So that's pretty reasonable. Dauntless Unity, we don't have the Rally of Wings. That was a pretty powerful card in the previous versions before rotation, obviously. Dauntless Unity seems like it's kind of an interesting card with a kicker ability. So I think it's worth at least taking a look at here. So we're going to kind of play around with 2 copies. For 2 mana, we can have all of our creatures get +1/+1 until end of turn. Or for kicker, that's 2 and 2 white. All of our creatures get +2/+1 until end of turn. So obviously 4 mana is a little bit steep, but in the late game, you're going to have 4 mana with all of your creatures out, and you can just kick this, spend all your mana to kick this, and just close out the game, and that should be good enough in certain situations, obviously. Lofty Denial is a 4/of, still really, really good counterspell with flyers. And another reason why we're running all these 1-drop flyers to make our Lofty Denial available to us as quickly as possible, so we can hold it up depending on what our opponent is doing. We can just kind of make sure we leave 2 mana open if we think we need to protect ourselves from our opponent's big threats or removal spells and things like that. A couple Mystic Subduals, just trying to find some cheap, efficient kind of pseudo removal. Since we already have evasion with the flying, letting our opponent keep their creature, don't necessarily care too much about that, and then having it get -2, -0, and lose all abilities. So even if it is like Elder Gargaroth, which is obviously a super prevalent card in the format and something that really hoses us pretty hard, this makes it lose all those abilities, so it doesn't have vigilance, reach, any of that stuff. And for just 2 mana, it's a pretty solid pseudo removal spell here, and flash speed as well. So we're gonna run 2 copies here, especially because of the versatility over like a Glass Casket or something like that. Skycat Sovereign obviously works extremely well with kind of a go wide strategy, because it gets +1/+1 for each other creature you control with flying, and it even has its own activated ability here to make 1/1 tokens to kind of essentially buff it up. Just 4 mana, which is a little bit steep, but it's pretty reasonable for what it does. Staggering Insight still is a really good card. Obviously, I was running this before in my Azorious Flyers list, and I think it's even more important now. So Staggering Insight, obviously you get +1/+1, lifelink, and whenever it deals damage to a player, draw a card. So obviously with all of our cheap, efficient flyers, with our evasive threats, we're going to be able to get some value off this pretty regularly. And it's kind of our only source of card advantage besides kind of the Windrobber, but that's more late game. But Insight lets us kind of start drawing cards as soon as turn 2 even. So Watcher of the Spheres, pretty reasonable card. Obviously we don't care about the reduction on the creature spells. It does kind of help with the Brazen Borrower, obviously, but other than that, not really too much value for us here. However, whenever a creature you control with flying enters the battlefield, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And that works really well with our cheap, efficient flyers, so we can play this on 2. And then turn 3, potentially have 2 or even 3 flyers to drop down and give it, +3/+3 until end of turn, which is super powerful, because we're trying to be very quick and aggressive. 2 copies of Banishing Light. Just gives us some kind of a catch-all removal. You know, we're pretty heavy in the 1 and 2 drop slot already, so don't mind running Banishing Light, especially since it is kind of a catch-all removal spell. And then, of course, the Brazen Borrower. Pretty much any deck in blue can run this, and since we're flyers, this gives us slots in perfectly. Obviously, being able to bounce anything on our opponent's side, super powerful. Give us that nice flexibility, and then a 3-powered flyer is great as well. Mana base, we do have 7 plains, 7 islands, 4 Temple of Enlightenment, 2 Fabled Passage to give us the fixing, and Triomes as a 2 of. Just kind of an extra tap land, but also kind of a late game way to cycle and kind of maybe dig for some additional threats or answers. Since we're obviously not super mana intensive, but we still need the fixing. Obviously, Brazen Borrower is double blue. We have these white and blue spells here, so we want to try to have as much fixing as we can, but not have like a bunch of tap lands because we are like an aggro list. So until we get the blue-white pathways, which will, I believe, are coming in the next step, we're a little bit hamstrung on kind of what we can do with our mana base. Sideboard here, obviously we need some Graveyard Hate, so Soulguide Lantern I think is kind of the best thing you should be doing. Obviously Tormod Script is a reasonable option as well. Disenchant, obviously we need ways to deal with our opponent's artifacts and enchantments. Glass Casket for when we do need to exile smaller creatures, you know, anything up to 3 mana. Essence Scatter for bigger creatures, mutate, whatever. 2 Negates to kind of protect our creatures from board wipes and spot removal. 1 more Banishing Light for some flex removal depending on what our opponent is up to. A couple Mystical Disputes for those more controlling matchups, and a couple Linvalas also give us some more protection for removal heavy matchups as well. Obviously the first paragraph here basically ignore, but the sacrifice one to give our creatures hexproof for indestructible, it's pretty solid. You know, so if our opponent goes to Shadow the Sky, well, we can just Linvala sacrifice to give the rest of our flyers indestructible and essentially nullify their Shadow of the Sky. That's the list. We'll jump into some matches. Alright, against MWJ Smith. Well, hand seems pretty reasonable. We have the Cleric and the Windrobber. We just go for the Windrobber for now. And kind of mill our opponent and give us a little bit more insight on what they're doing, and we can kind of help kind of sequence things here. Throne of Makindi. So that's the kicker land. Okay. Alright, so we can play 2 flyers here, or we can Banishing Light, depending on what they do. Well, there's not too much worried about. Labyrinth of Scophos. Maze Mind Tome. Okay. Opponent's got a super slow deck here. We're going to go for the... yeah, we have enough white, so we can just do this and this. So we'll swing for 6. And that's why I run the Faerie Guidemother, even though we're already running flyers. Alright, so was that a Skyclave, or no, Forsaken Monument. So they're playing kicker and colorless spells. Not really sure what our opponent's up to, but we're aggroing them pretty hard. No indication they have a board wipe. Could be the swamp. Could mean they have Extinction Event, maybe. I think we just want to go as aggressive as possible here. So we're going to not worry about kicker on the Cleric. Obviously we don't run too many lands, so there's not really any reason to hold up this when we're stuck on 3 lands anyway, because it might be a few turns before we hit our land drop. So I'd rather just get the boost to the Sovereign and add more to the board. And if they do find a creature, we have the Mystic Subdual or Banishing Light. So Maze Mind Tome is on 3 counters, but it's on their turn, so they don't get to 4 before we can kill them. And they concede. Okay. Didn't really see too much for them. Doesn't seem like super slow. Could have just kept a bad... could have just kept a slow hand and we were just put too much pressure on them too quickly. I mean, I don't know why you're running Throne of Makindi and Forsaken Monument in the same build. Obviously Dauntless Unity could just kind of kill them before they do their stuff, but probably need to play it safe and just hold up in like some negates. Disenchant is probably worth it as well. Since we don't know if they're running creatures, I mean, it's kind of implied that they are. But we still have the Banishing Lights here. We're bringing the Disenchant, so we know they're running artifacts. We got a couple of Negates to go along with Lofty Denials, also kind of help us out with some of their bigger spells. We'll kind of see what they do before we bring in Essence Scatter or the Disputes, but if they're more Coalesce, obviously Disputes don't really do much, but Essence Scatter could be relevant depending on what they're up to. If they have like Stone Coil Serpent, obviously, but no clue what they're up to. Obviously, it's pretty decent hand. We don't have any of our. I guess we Temple here. I'd say it's pretty good. I'm not going to say no to that. Obviously, we could have gone with the Triome there as well, but since we don't need a ton of lands and we already have a couple in hand, seems pretty reasonable to just kind of go for go for the Scry first and maybe find another land off the top. But Insight's pretty good. I assume they boarded in more removal here, so we're seeing more black this time. That's interesting. Two Hagra Maulings. We do need blue, so I think we just play the Windrobber and the Guidemother just to get some creatures down, kind of go wide a little bit. And obviously eventually we'll need double blue for the Brazen Borrower, and since we drew land but it was a plains, I think we have to play the Triome, and of course we're punished because we drew an island off the top. 4 mana open and a bunch of cards in hand still. I still think we go for it. We'll put it on the, try to go for the Guidemother. And we just hold a Brazen Borrower here. See what we draw as well. A Watcher, that's pretty good. Also, you have to be worried about Extinction Event. So we've seen Bloodchief Cirrus, we've seen the Hagra Maulings. No reason to bounce the egg here. I think we just go for the Watcher, or try to. We don't need Windrobber number 3. So they activate their Labyrinth, take out the Guidemother, hit for 1. So that's going to be pretty annoying. Hopefully they tap out and they can't activate it. Alright, so they're got a lot of annoying tricks up their sleeve. I mean, with this Labyrinth and them being on 20 life still, even though we've kind of been able to add to the board, I think we just kind of have to go for it. So we'll spread the love here and kind of force their hand on kind of what they want to use the Labyrinth on. So we got the Watcher as a 4/4, we got the Windrobber as a 3-powered, and the Guidemother, which will of course draw us cards. And they do that, so we get to hit for 7 at least. And Watcher means we can also just play this Brazen Borrower for 3 power as a 3-powered flyer with our double blue mana. Still not entirely sure what our opponent is up to, but they're of course. I mean, that card doesn't see a ton of play, but they made it work. So we have 4 mana open. I think we just go for the activated ability here to make a token. But yeah, I don't really see us getting out of this one at this point. They're still at 13. They're playing much of annoying stuff, which is really slowing us down, giving them a lot of incremental value. I mean, they still have 4 cards in hand. Labyrinth. I feel like we're pretty well locked out of the game. We'll just move on. We kind of have a little bit of idea what they're up to. Obviously, drawing all the 1-drops was kind of nice, but it was pretty annoying because we couldn't really do much. Still, haven't really seen permanents from them besides those artifacts. But I mean, I don't know why you would run that the artifact that gives your colorless creatures +2 unless you're running creatures, but we still haven't seen any creatures from them. I mean, you could bring Disputes just to have a counter spell. I guess we do that. It'll be a 3-mana counter, which isn't ideal, but obviously drawing more counters and things like that would be a lot better than just drawing all creatures. That is a Negate, so that's something. Alright, so we got Windrobber into Staggering Insight. Should be good enough here on 2 to kind of give us a good advantage, especially on the draw. But yeah, our opponent with the Fountains gaining the incremental life, the Maze Mind Tome, which can gain life later, the Labyrinth, which can take our creatures out of combat. It's pretty annoying. So they're getting lots of incremental value. And of course they have a Bloodchief's Thirst again, because why wouldn't they? Alright, well, we'll just add 2 more flyers to the board. We want to get this insight down so we can kind of find more lands. So I think we just go for that. Put on the Guidemother. So if they go to kill that, we can just get some incremental value off the Windrobber. Alright, still no lands, but we do have a couple counters at least. Solemn Simulacrum, don't care about that. We can swing over the top of that just fine. Now we just hold open counter magic and hope we can draw some lands off this insight. There we go. In that case, we'll play out the Cleric and pass the turn. Probably lead with Lofty Denial as our first counter spell. Maybe we didn't need to counter that, but alright, that's perfect. Alright, we'll grab a blue source, obviously, before we draw. Disenchant. Save that for a more meaningful target. Don't want to give him the card advantage of Solemn Simulacrum. Maze Mind Tome is annoying, but there's still a few turns from actually getting enough counters to where it matters. I think we can flash one of these in. Let's go to combat first and see if we can find an untapped land. Otherwise we'll just play out this temple. I'm down to 5. So we're kind of doing things. But they take our Guidemother out of combat. They had just enough lands. But I don't need another island here. I'll just pass the turn. So we're threatening lethal next turn. Let's have a way to wipe our board. We do have the Negate. And they have 2 counters on the Maze Mind Tome, but it's not going to be enough here to gain the life back. Could have a Golden Egg that they could play and then crack it. Okay, we got there. I guess it's just a colorless control build. I mean, Maze Mind Tome is a pretty solid card in a control deck. This is just here just to draw cards, I guess. I mean, draw 2 cards. It's okay. Obviously, Solemn Simulacrum is a pretty reasonable inclusion. Not really sure what the monument is here for, honestly, though. I mean, if Solemn Simulacrum is your only creature, I feel like we didn't see enough of their deck to really know what they were doing. They have, obviously, the Labyrinth's a pretty spicy inclusion. Taking our things out was pretty nice for them, obviously, not for us. Alright, against Inter Voyager. Or Yager. One of those two. Yeah, we're definitely keeping it. Just gotta figure out how we want to sequence. I think I like just playing the Cleric into Sovereign and kind of going from there. Opponent with plains. Probably grab another blue source with this Fabled Passage since we have these two. Just want to make sure we can get to those. Oh, Watcher's actually pretty good here. Let's go to swings first. Alright, is this a life gain deck, or what do we got going on over here? Radiant Fountain and Plains. And Animal Sanctuary. So they just kept awkward hand, it looks like. I think we still just keep adding more creatures to the board. That doesn't really do a whole lot for us, so maybe we just Fabled Passage and kind of thin the deck a little bit. Since we'll be at 4 lands, and we're pretty much good from there. And we go to Insight and hold up Lofty Denial. Assuming our opponent doesn't have a way to deal with our board here. They could draw, obviously go into Plains into Shadow the Sky. In theory. Just don't really know what our opponent is up to. Falconer Adept. Well, that's kind of annoying because they will get flyers when they attack. It is tapped and attacking though. So they make a 1/1 that's tapped and attacking, but of course they can untap with it. I think we want to spread the love here, put it on the Watcher. And I think we just petty theft their Falconer. Just kind of force them to replay it. The Watcher is really good too. Maybe we just don't even care. We'll let them untap and see what they do pre-combat here. Rather than add to the board, then maybe go for some removal. Yeah, I think we want to counter that. I think we like our board here pretty good. They can attack, but they don't have any blockers though. And they can't block our flyers at this point anyway. Right, so we got the extra trigger there and grow our Skycat. Unfortunately, we are short on blue mana to get this Brazen Borrower down, otherwise that would be lethal. And we don't have 4 to activate the Skycat either, so our opponent's down to 1. Try. Well, probably just cycle that. With our opponent down to 1, I don't think we would care about this Falconer at all. Another Radiant Fountain. I guess if you're just a mono colorless, you can get away with Fountain, but otherwise it just seems kind of a waste, especially since we haven't really seen any way for them to kind of get value off of that. I guess we block. Doesn't matter. Well, let's just cycle this. I feel like this game is probably over. Another white source. Okay, so assuming they're just on mono white and just kind of some... Does this even count towards party? Soldier? Soldier doesn't even count towards party, so I'm not sure why you're running Journey to Oblivion. Yeah, really not sure what they're up to. It's so they're in white, so we have to assume they're on like some removal like Shatters, especially since they were so slow, but Falconer and Journey without party payoffs feels feels pretty bad though, so I think we just assume that they have removal and bring in Linvala to kind of protect us from the board wipes. Negates. We can leave in the Subduals since we know they're running at least some. We know they're running some creatures, obviously. Don't care too much about the Falconer because it's just not a very good card, but if they do obviously untap with the 1/1, then obviously that can chump block us and kind of slow us down, which we don't like. We are pretty mana heavy here, but we'd have a 1-drop into 2-drop, and the Skycat's obviously a really powerful card. So I think we just keep it, especially since we can Play these on curve. Alright, Radiant Fountain Tribal over there. So they're also doing cycling stuff. Swing one, play the Skycat Sovereign, and then we can kind of go for the Staggering Insight, I think. We'll see what they have. Speaker of the Heavens. They do have some life gain over there. We'll put it on the Windrobber since obviously the Skycat is going to be a target for removal. So make them kind of think twice about which creature they want to get rid of. Alright, obviously play the Temple here. Do we want another Insight? I mean, it's a good card. But do we need two? I don't think the life gain really matters. Obviously the card advantage is pretty sweet. But I'd rather find like some protection spells here, honestly. We're drawing a lot of lands, so I think we will just go for this Fabled Passage. Obviously we're very blue heavy right now, so we'll grab a island. I think we just Skycat here, get the extra boost. Swing 5, see what we draw. Watcher, that's pretty good too. Let's go full aggro here. Obviously we could hold up in Petty Theft on this Falconer, but again we're not really worried about it. Alright, Radiant Fountain number 2, even after we've managed to mill one. Faith's Fetters, and they gain more life, so that's kind of annoying. Alright, we have a pretty easy block here on the 1/1. They get in for 2, trying to pressure life total since they can't really block with that. I think we Temple here, try to... Yeah, let's Linvala. She's pretty strong. So we'll draw her and play her. Alright, so if they do draw Shatter the Sky, we're pretty well set. And we have 2 mana open to obviously Petty Theft something as well. A little land heavy, but we do have our card draw engine online. We'd have Linvala for protection, so I don't really see a way for us to lose this game. I have 2 colorless lands. The Animal Sanctuary, I have no idea why they're running that. And they play Amiria's Call tapped. Oh no, the Basilica. Never mind. Sweet. Well, we bounce the Falconer, and they're kind of pretty well screwed at this point. So again, with the Brazen Borrowers in hand, we just grab another island. Do that before combat so we can try to minimize our chances of drawing lands with the Windrobber. Actually, I think they're just dead here. Yeah. Sweet. Azorious Flyer, still pretty solid deck. Alright, so a couple of solid matches there. I think we'll go ahead and cut it short there. Obviously a little bit shorter video, but you know, just got back from vacation and got some work stuff coming up, so I'm not gonna have as much time to make videos here the next couple weeks that I would like to. So the videos will probably continue to be a little bit shorter for a little bit, so I can kind of get caught up. But I mean, 2 pretty solid matches. Obviously, there's kind of some jank there, but you can kind of see how the deck operates or wants to operate. And you know, even if our opponent is doing a little bit more stronger stuff, we still have, you know, lofty denials and pretty solid sideboard. Obviously, I'm recording this before potential ban announcements, but I still think the sideboard is going to be relevant even after that. You know, we're not too heavily worried about you know, some of the top meta decks like Adventures and Omnath, but that's kind of also why we're not really playing ranked, because that's kind of that, and of course rogues are just kind of dominating the standard meta right now. That's fine. Unranked FAQ still gives us a chance to kind of try out a variety of decks, and that's really the main emphasis here. Obviously after rotation I wasn't really sure if Azorious Flyer was still going to be a thing. It was kind of on the back burner, and then I've been kind of seeing some other you know, content creators kind of do some decks, and it kind of made me realize that, you know, maybe there's still a little something here. I imagine this deck continues to get better with the future sets. Seem like they always kind of release some reasonable flyers in the Azorious colors. With each new set, it seems like there's always like kind of one or two new spicy additions. Obviously, we got the Kitesail Cleric here in the new one, which is pretty similar to like the Ardenvale Tactician, which obviously you can play as an adventurer. It's a 2-mana instant speed adventure, which is kind of better than the Cleric, because you can kind of do it on your opponent's turn, so they don't get to attack into you. And then you have a 2/3 body, which is obviously a little better than a 1/1. But I think for what we're trying to do here, just having the aggressive, all these 1 and 2 drops to kind of slam the board with creatures as quickly as possible, and kind of swarm your opponent before they can really do much about it. And then with the main deck Lofty Denial as well, just getting that online as quickly as possible, so it basically will counter anything for 2 mana. Super sweet. Mystic Subdual. I haven't really played around with this card too much, but it seems like this is probably worth taking a look at. You know, obviously Elder Gargaroth really shuts us down pretty hard, since most of our creatures are pretty small. Potentially we get the Skycat Sovereign big enough to get over to fly through a Gargaroth, where they have to chump block it. But obviously Watcher of the Spheres only gets so big per turn. You know, get up to 4 or maybe 5 on any given turn. But yeah, Insight is super key. You really need 4 copies here of this card. You want to see it as much as possible. And since we're pretty heavily invested in 1 and 2 drops, Banishing Light is kind of a nice 3-drop here to kind of a catch-all removal, depending on whatever your opponent's doing. And of course, Brazen Borrower also, since we're pretty aggressive deck, just 10 point out our opponent can be pretty powerful right there. And the Dauntless Unity, it's kind of a flex card. Again, haven't really been able to get too much value off of this yet, but I think it's kind of one of your best bets in terms of replacing a Rally of Wings just for the kicker cost, giving your creatures +2/+1. Obviously 4 mana is pretty steep, but by that point in the game, like, you don't really care necessarily that it's going to be 4 mana. And the Guidemother, obviously we saw some value here where you could just give one of our creatures that already had flying +2/+1, and that just how much of a boost that is, even though it seems maybe a little overkill since it already has flying, but we don't really care about that. Just the +2/+1 boost is good enough, and then having it come down as a 1/1 flyer that boosts your Skycat or your Watcher of the Spheres as well. So it's essentially it's a 3-power boost to your existing attack, so that's pretty powerful. Obviously the Windrobber is pretty interesting, especially with Uro out of the format. We don't really care about milling our opponents anymore. Obviously Kroxa and Rakdos midrange has kind of made a bit of a comeback, so that's something we have to be a little bit mindful of. But we have, you know, Soul Guide Lantern for some additional you know, hate for graveyards and things like that. And some other kind of spicy cards kind of play around with, but I feel like this is a pretty good starting point for a sideboard. Kind of gives you a little bit of a game against everything. Obviously we have the counters here in the main deck already that kind of helps you out with that, Banishing Lights, things like that. But yeah, if you can go aggressive, the Skycat and the Watcher of the Spheres are pretty solid, kind of work really well together, and with all the 1-drop flyers. Obviously it's no Spectral Sailor, but still a pretty solid card, and no Healer's Hawks, but still pretty reasonable cards. And with Insight we have life gain there if it's relevant. And yeah, I feel pretty good about the mana bases there. Trying to keep the tap lands to a minimum, obviously, so we can try to play everything on curve, but also we don't want to flood out either, so that's why the Triome is here, just to kind of cycle it. Obviously 3 mana is a little bit steep, but if you're flooding out, then you don't necessarily mind paying the 3 mana, because we have all these efficient 1 and 2 mana spells that we can potentially still cycle for 3 and then still have 1 or 2 mana open to actually you know, play something afterwards. And then the Fabled Passage gives us that fixing, because we do have some pretty a lot of these intense mana costs that are both white and blue on the same card, and you know, obviously double blue for Brazen Borrower, so we kind of need to really get that fixing, especially with the minimal lands that we are running. I did try with some of the modal-faced dual lands, the spell lands, as kind of like to call them, seem like a little bit easier, like the Druari Disruption and the Sajiri Shelter or whatever, the one that gives protection, and they just felt too awkward. Didn't quite feel good enough to me. I don't think any of the other ones really felt strong enough either. Obviously you might see like people trying to run Amiri's Call and things like that, but if you look at our curve, like, when are you actually going to get to 7 mana to actually get value off of that? Like, we never got to 7 mana in any of those matches. You want to kill your opponent as quickly as possible, and if you're counting on a 7 mana spell to kind of give you value, I think you're just kind of barking up the wrong tree there. So, and obviously the blue one is more for control decks with drawing a million cards, as far as the mythic one. So that's why we're not running any of those. And yeah, otherwise, you know, Azorious Flyer is a pretty reasonable deck. Could probably do okay on some of the lower levels of the ladder. Hopefully we'll get some bans here on Monday or soon and kind of make the format a little bit more, get a little more variety going in the format, and maybe something like this could be played a little bit more consistently on ladder. But for now, unranked play is kind of where it's at. So thanks for watching, guys. Till next time, make sure you jank with purpose.